Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's Coaches Roundtable. Great to see you.
Hello.
Today we're talking about how to say no. Nada. I don't think so. Boy, I wish I had the time, but it turns out I can't. So all of those good things. And as coaches, we know we have sometimes had to help clients figure out where their no belongs or how to say it. And that makes room for yeses. So without further ado, my slides are a little different this week. Let's see how I do. How we go. Okay, present mode. Okay. I thought this was a picture of a fellow saying, yeah, I can't. No. How to say no. We all find ourselves in these situations. And today that's what we're going to talk about. Okay. This slide was going to have little bullets on it. So we had talking points. And my little bullets would not stay in the right place. So I abandoned the effort. I said no to the little bullets on this slide. And instead, Angela is going to tell us about an enlightened no. And this is a graphic image of an enlightened no. So that's our second slide. And then we'll go to our memes. This goes a lot faster when I don't talk a lot in the beginning. Okay, here's our memes. Let's see. This is a card. This is for neurodivergent people, according to the author of this little meme. Sorry, I simply can't do this. This card entitles the bearer to be excused from one socially awkward situation if they're choosing without explanation, guilt, or social sanction. It's like a get out of jail free card, but it's a sorry card. I thought this one was funny. I know there are people that engage in plant medicine. The saying, say no to drugs, has always made me laugh. If you're talking to drugs, it's probably too late to say no to them. This one is a little hard to read, but here's a book title that says Things I Want to Do, and then writing down notes, things I can do. So, boy, we help people a lot where I want to say yes to the cupcakes for the class party, and I want to say yes to be the chaperone to the school field trip, and I can't say yes to everything. I just can't do everything. Okay. At the top, today I'm choosing kindness, but we'll see. It's still early. So maybe the phrasing, and it's also kinder to everybody to say no than to ghost them or to not show up or to do the job halfway because you really couldn't pull it off. It is more kind to tell the truth for everybody involved. Okay, then the bottom one here. The most satisfying adult sentence. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I've heard your request. I'm not going to do that. Well, it's so good to see all of you here. Brian, would you like to chat a little bit? And then Angela will have to help us with the enlightened no that the duck was practicing. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, sure. So I wrote down a lot of thoughts here. I didn't realize I had a lot of thoughts on this topic, but I guess I do. So how to say no. So one thing you can do is you can just walk away. So I've done this before.
Turn around on
Someone's,
the other.
yeah, and I'll tell you a story about this too. Someone's like asking me for something, and if I feel like they have bad intent for me, like I just feel like this is coming from a really bad place, I'll just walk away. Like I don't say anything. And honestly, sometimes it's good to do that. But this is more of a strategy to deal with like people when you feel like they really don't have good intentions for you. Do you just kind of leave, just get out of there? So, Mom, you'll probably remember this. When I was in high school, there was another guy who was also named Brian, and he constantly tried to recruit me into this organization, which was called Demolay.
I remember.
It's like the youth version of like Freemasons or something.
Yeah.
He probably asked me more than 20 times to join. So like every time he would see me, he would like run up to me and just start just being like, "Hey man, hey Brian, hey, so we have another Demolay meeting. Like, we really want you to come. You got to join. It's gonna be great." And I was like, "Nah, man, I'm good. I'm not. I don't want to do that." He came back another like 20 times. So he would like stalk me when I was at my locker. He would just run up to me when I was trying to get stuff out of my locker, and I was like, "Hi," like and then, I mean, this went on and on. So eventually, I would just start ignoring him. I would just start walking away. He would still walk with me when I was obviously ignoring him and walking away and still trying to keep on the conversation. And eventually he got the message, but sometimes you have to get more and more aggressive and firm with your no. I think like women can relate to this. If a guy keeps asking them out and they've said no multiple times and he just keeps asking them out, like you have to get more creative with your no's at a certain point. Um, so let's see here. Also, it's good to be able to say no without explanation.
Yes.
That's kind of like a power move, which I think is good to master.
Mhm.
It's also very good to say yes at times. So I'm not like against everything, but
Mhm.
we're just talking specifically about saying no. So
Mhm.
sometimes when someone asks you something like, "Hey, can you help me with this?" It's good if you just go, "No." That's it. Like you don't necessarily owe someone an explanation, especially if it's like someone you don't know well and they just start asking you for stuff. You can just be like, "No." That's it. No. And I think it's good to do that. Now, if you know someone well, you're friendly with them, definitely you can be a lot kinder. You can give them an explanation. You can maybe try to find a way that you could help them out, but maybe you can't agree to the whole thing. That's another good strategy to be aware of. Like maybe you can say yes to one aspect, but not the full request
Mhm.
or two aspects. So sometimes you kind of need to renegotiate the terms a little bit.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or maybe like you've done several things to help someone else out. They've never done anything to help you. And you can kind of in a subtle way sort of mention like, well, if you could help me with this one thing, then I can help you with that. And if they're like, no, I'm not gonna help with that, then you're like, okay, well, there's your answer. Like it's not mutual, so you
Mhm.
know
Mhm. Mhm.
they don't need to ask you for more stuff in the future. But a lot of times it's good to say yes, and it's good to help people, and it's good to care about people. But at a certain point, it has to become mutual. Otherwise, you're just becoming a doormat.
Mhm.
And I think it's good to like test for that. Like if someone's asked you to help them multiple times and you've helped them out, but they've never done anything for you, ask them for something and see if they actually come through for you. Because then you know if they're just trying to use you or if they're trying to establish a mutually beneficial relationship. I think it's like good practice to do that
Mhm.
because any relationship should benefit both people involved, right?
Mhm.
Um, so it's good to do that. Let's see. You can also be a little bit tricky. Um, I think this is kind of amusing to talk about. Sometimes you can make it sound like you agreed to something when you actually didn't. So this is like a social skill. So like someone asks you for something, you're like, I got you. And it kind of sounds like you said yes, but technically you didn't. Like that actually just means I understand what you said. Now, again, with good people, you don't have to do any of this. You
Mhm.
can just be direct, honest, truthful. This is more for dealing with people who are trying to get stuff out of you and they don't want to be like friendly in return. So I'm like talking about strategies for those situations. If someone treats you good, you should treat them good. I mean, that's how I feel. So yeah, let's see. You can also kind of bring up things in a subtle way, which is I also think this is a good relationship skill. Um, and sometimes it's a good way to get your message across without starting an argument, especially if someone can pick up on the subtlety involved. So, like, someone asks you for something, right? But the last couple times you asked them for something, they said no. So, like, right after they ask you for something, you can be like, God, I remember when I needed help with that one thing. Man, that sucked. That was tough. And you just kind of move on. It kind of subtly conveys the message like, when I needed help, you weren't there for me, but you're not directly starting an argument. If you directly state, hey, you never helped me, so I'm not going to help you, it might escalate. And now you have to do the whole argument, which you can do. But this is kind of a subtle way to communicate that. And I think if you do it not from a place to hurt someone, but it's just a way to subtly communicate like your needs without trying to start an argument, then I think you can use that. So yeah, but if you tell someone no a bunch of times and they just ignore it, you're well within your rights to just always tell them you're unavailable. They keep asking you for help. You can just always be unavailable or just start ignoring them, especially if you've already directly told them, look, I'm not interested in this. Like I was saying with my DMLA story, that guy just wouldn't even take no for an answer. Um, so it's good to have those skills. But I do want to emphasize it's really good to say yes to a lot of things. It's good to say yes to mutually beneficial arrangements. Like it's good to, you know, care and help people out. I think it's good to give people the benefit of the doubt from the beginning. Just assume like you can help them out to start with, assume they'll help you back. But if you start to notice that they don't, you can start to shift over to more of this just to kind of respect yourself and just make sure you're not kind of like being a doormat in the relationship. Um, I'll talk about some strategic ways to say yes and no, like at the workplace, just because I think it's good for people to be aware of this stuff. You don't have to use this, but strategically, like when you're at your office, if you're just trying to move up the corporate ladder, and even if you're not going to do this, I think it's important that you understand that other people are doing this in your office, most likely. It's good to say yes, like to your bosses or the higher ups, because you're sort of getting credit or brownie points from them, which can help you move up. If you have a coworker who's on your same level and they're always asking you to help with their job, which a lot of people deal with that, I think it's good for you to say yes if they also help you. But if they're just like outsourcing all their work to you, you're gonna have to draw a line at some point. And that's why I'm explaining this to people to help give them, these skills. And also, even if you're helping a coworker, that does not mean they're not going to throw you under the bus later to try to get a promotion themselves. A lot of people do that kind of stuff in office places. So you can't assume just because you help them do a lot of their work that they're not going to talk crap about you to the boss when it's time for someone to get a promotion. Like that stuff happens a lot. And I mean, until we get to like a post-scarcity world, I would just expect that will continue to happen. There's always going to be some Game of Thrones type of stuff going on, even in office dynamics, as long as people have to fight over resources. I mean, it's just going to happen. So I just think it's good to be aware of that. Not that people have to use that, but it's good to be aware of it. You can also say no in very nice ways. And like you could say, you know what, I can't help you with that, but I know someone who probably could help you. And then like you're still helping them out without having to do the big like favor that they're asking for from you. That might actually help improve your relationship with them as well. They might really appreciate that you pass that along to them. So it can actually strengthen your relationship, but you didn't actually have to do all the extra like favor they were asking you for. Again, I just think it's good for people to be aware of all this stuff. And also like in the articles that you posted in the roundtable link, Mom, there was some good advice in there that I read through. One good point was, you are responsible for creating your boundaries. but you're not responsible for other people's reactions. And I do think it's very good to be aware of that.
Mhm.
And in general, I think it's good for all of us to treat each other well. But I think sometimes you can fall victim to like naivete when you sort of just assume that there's a larger culture out there where everyone just wants to help each other out, because that's often not the case. So I do think people need to be aware of these things because these things play out in human life all the time. So that's my tirade. Thank you all for listening.
Well, Brian, I appreciate that feedback. Thanks for the reminder. In the show notes, we have Harvard Business Review notes about how to say no in a C-suite. Like,
Yeah.
no, we can't fund that project, but we'll have more funding next quarter. Come back to me. How to say no in interpersonal relationships from Psychology Today. So check the show notes, and there are some tips from some experts. It's a real thing. It's a challenge. And Brian, I appreciate your feedback. I know in coaching, when you get no's, you have kind of restructured how you're going to spend your time and your energy. Like you've taken a fresh look at that. And especially for moms and dads, sometimes busy families, there's too much going on the regular. Like people are sort of tapped out pretty much all the time. And so I like your suggestion, Brian, to give a partial yes. I have an hour free in the morning. I could drive there. I can't do the pickup, if that helps you. I also asked someone when Brian was in middle school, I foolishly signed up to do the book fair. And then all my volunteers disappeared. And I thought, that's okay. I'm a powerhouse. I can do the book fair by myself. But the school librarian wanted a three-ring circus, and she gave me a binder of duties from the stay-at-home mom who did it last year, who spent 3 months making a perfect book fair and produced a binder for how to repeat that experience. And I remember talking to Chris, my friend Chris, who I did hamburger lunch with on Wednesdays. And I said, I'm in over my head. I have this binder. It's a three-ring circus. My volunteers have disappeared. We were brand new in the school, so nobody owed us any allegiance for anything in the politics of all the places where we have people relationships. And she said, you know what? Take it down to two rings, even one ring. You don't have to do a three-ring circus. So she couldn't volunteer to help me, but she volunteered to help me sort it out. So sometimes I can't help you on that project, but let's look at it together for a few minutes. Maybe there's something we can do to carve it smaller, delay the timing, and give yourself more time. What can we do? So Brian was Clifford the Big Red Dog. That was my main circus feature. He and his
I
friends
don't even
took
remember that.
turns putting on the costume of Clifford the Big Red Dog, who's the mascot for the book fair. And now that amazing mom with the binder did not pull off the mascot, but I did. So my one ring in the circus was a home run. Brian and his friends were going into the boys' bathroom to change, and they were guessing, who's in the big red dog? Is that Brian? Is that Zach? All the little kids were so excited because Clifford came to the book fair. So my one ring circus worked out fine. But yeah, I think that there are so many different ways to help. If you can reframe the request for help, you've said yes to something, but no to other things, and you're really honoring yourself in the other relationship. But Angela, tell us about the enlightened no, which you informed me of maybe 15 years ago, and I've used many, many times.
Well, I don't think it was that long ago, but it feels like that. I mean, what is time these days?
Yeah.
And I will talk about that real quickly because, and it's not my concept, it's concept by Dr. Gay Hendricks. But I want to react to something that Brian said because I thought, I was thinking as he was talking, is like, mic drop. I know you called it a tirade, but let's just drop the mic. Do you have anything else to say to follow up on that? Um, but I was thinking about how you were saying no, just the simple no. And it was like, I don't think I've ever been able to just say a simple no in my life. Anybody here a people pleaser or have been in the past a people pleaser?
Mhm.
I mean, I
Accommodating.
think I in the past for sure. Yeah.
Call it accommodating.
I
You're,
said yes to a book
Yeah.
fair, so
yeah,
evidence is on the
service
table.
natured, service, trained in the service industry, that's me. I worked in fast food. I worked in my mom's beauty salon when I was 14, so learned how to, just be accommodating. And so I don't think I've ever just been able to say no without any kind of something else after it, you know? So I have found though that I need to be honest, but I do need to do it in such a way, or I've had to do it in such a way that it's it's not arguable. Does that make sense? Because if you said something like to that guy who was pestering you at your locker, Brian,
Yeah.
I'm not interested. And then he's just going to give you all the arguments as to why you should be interested and why he thinks you ought to be interested. And you're wrong about this because this is totally good, would be interesting to you. So I'm just not interested sometimes isn't enough, right? Because then a person has to, if they're excited about getting you to say yes, or in the sales mode of trying to get you to say yes, because that's what it is, right? If we get down to
Yeah.
it, you have to be careful that you're not giving them the what we call in sales the objection. And so they train you in sales to overcome the objection, and really get to the bottom of why it is that you're saying no. So I found that in being accommodating in the past and not really tolerating that anymore and doing that anymore. There's a couple of things I came across. I don't remember who it was, but they were really advocating the hell yes and the hell no. I don't know. You remember that? That it's a famous person who was doing that. And so there's that. And then Gay Hendricks talked about it in his book, The Big Leap. Now that's an old book. I don't remember when it came out, but I remember discovering it around 2016, is when I came across it. And Dr. Gay Hendricks and his wife are psychologists, and they deal with a lot of, they've done a lot of family therapy, but he's done a lot of executive coaching, a lot of executive working with executives. And he came up with these concepts about the different zones of our ability, the zone of our incompetence, zone of competence, zone of excellence, and zone of genius. So a lot of times he talks about that zone of genius in the book, where he talks about if you want to make the big leap into your zone of genius, this is the thing that you really are meant to be doing. It is what is super excites you and so forth. And of course, at the time, I was really, really captivated by this in supporting people in their career paths. And I was really excited about some of the examples he used in there about, he used Bonnie Raitt as an example, the famous singer Bonnie Raitt, who had been really excellent at blues and the music that she came up in her modest fame she had was in the blues arena. And then she started hearing these songs, these music that was occurring to her, which wasn't the blues. It was really more pop mainstream sound. And then when she went for it, and went into this kind of zone of genius, she ended up winning a Grammy Award for her next two albums that were focused in that. So he talks about that. He and his wife are friends with Bonnie Raitt, so that was a good example. But in his discussion about the zone of genius, he talks about how it's best to say what he calls an enlightened no. So I love that. And the Zen guy with his, mudra, I think that's called a mudra when you hold your feet in a certain way, in your little meme, where he's saying no, and it's an enlightened no. I love that. And the examples that he gives in the book are really interesting. Like for instance, you can be in your zone of incompetence, and that's, I don't know, they're handing you the 3-ring binder so you can do the 3-ring circus, right? And you're like, I'm in my
In
zone
3
of
weeks.
incompetence
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, sure.
The example he gives in the book, he's like, okay, so this executive he was working with was telling him how he had understood that he was in his zone of incompetence in doing this, but it was a personal story. He was trying to set up this printer at his home, set up with his computer set up at home. And he was struggling and struggling and struggling. And his wife was pissed at him because he had given up the whole weekend to try to figure out how to make this printer work. And it wasn't working and he couldn't make it happen. And he just realized, I'm in my zone of incompetence here. I have no business setting up this printer. I'm not a tech guy. This is not my thing. But the neighborhood kid down the street is this, right? So he brings him in and he says, I'll pay you, set this printer up. Lickety split, in a couple of hours, everything's done, all is done. So he was trying to demonstrate how we sometimes will spend time in our zone of incompetence or even in our zone of competence. And sometimes we get stuck in our zone of excellence. So we're really good at something and it's our comfort zone and we're the expert at it and people keep coming to us for information on this and so forth. And that's a place where he says is you can get into a trap. And then someone comes along and asks you something that could be your zone of genius and are you saying no? So the enlightened no is when you're saying no to the things that are not in your zone of genius. In essence, is what he is saying. And
Mhm.
when I was reading that back in what 2016, it just the light bulb went on, and I was able to understand the struggle that I've had as being an accommodating person and trying to say the no when I knew in my heart it was the no, was the wrong thing, right? My intuition was telling me no. But how did I make it where it's not a rational no? I can't rationalize it with this person. But then I started to understand that sometimes it was because that was not in my zone of genius and or in my even in my zone of excellence in some cases. I said no twice to being the president of an organization. They didn't stop at asking me once, Brian. They asked me a couple of times, right?
Mhm.
And I just knew intuitively it was the wrong thing for me because of the things that I had going on. But could I anticipate what was getting ready to happen. My health went into a decline. I had to have surgery. And shortly after that, I went through a divorce. There was no way I was going to be able to run 1,000-person organization as the president in that year. It's just wasn't going to be possible. I
Mhm.
didn't know that was going to happen. Those are things that were fairly unexpected for me that happened within the next 12 to 14 months. But the commitment wasn't just 1 year. It would have been you're getting ready, geared up to be president. You are the president for a year, and then you have the past president role on the board. So it was like almost a 3-year commitment, right? Ultimately. Well, I was trying to reinvigorate my whole life, recover from a major surgery, get my health back, and rebuild my life after a divorce. So there was no way I was going to be able to do that. And I look back on that when I was reading Hendrix's book and realizing he has some real interesting, this is super relevant because I had lived it pretty much by saying no. And since then, I've said no. Now, sometimes I just want to bring this up too, and then I want to kick it over to whomever wants to speak next. But this is why this topic really intrigued me, Myrna,
Mhm.
was what if you're saying no and you're freaking yourself out about saying no? Because
Yeah.
that's happening to me recently.
Yes.
Like life seems to be shifting and changing in such a dramatic way that my head, my mind, my personality, my ego that's used to things being the way cannot keep up with when my intuition says say no to this. And it wants to argue. It wants to say, whoa, 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 wait, wait, whoa, that's a monetary opportunity that you're saying no to.
Mhm.
And it's my zone of excellence. It's not in
Mhm.
my zone of genius, but it's in my zone of excellence. And don't you have to pay the bills? Why saying I have to say, there is a beauty. It is a beautiful thing to be self-employed, people. I'm just saying, I recommend it 100%. It does, though, require a lot of discipline, a lot of self-discipline, and a lot of sometimes you do have to say things to yes because you're being strappy
Cash
and
flow.
stuff.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I'm not in a situation where I have to be beholden to an employer and the employer wants me to do something and it totally is misaligned with me,
Mhm.
or the project is totally misaligned with me, but my living and the way I earn a living is so incumbent on my saying yes to it. That is sometimes difficult. So sometimes you have to say yes to things that you're screaming in your heart to say no because you have what the golden handcuffs on, right? The money. The money is like the thing. And so for me, that's been the big struggle is to when you say no to something that could be a financial risk to you, to say no and have enough trust in your zone of genius, in your intuition, and taking into a spiritual point of view into your higher self, that your higher self is looking out for you, that your higher self knows what's best for you and all concerned. And that when you say no, an enlightened no is when you say no to something because it is ultimately the best for all concerned. Gay Hendricks points out that if you say no to something, you might be actually, if you say yes to something that you don't really want to do, that you should be having the enlightened no to do, are you barring someone else's opportunity? Like if someone else wanted to step up and be in their zone of genius because you're just saying it out of being accommodating.
Mhm.
And that was a big aha to me as I was reading his book years ago. It was a very life-changing book, I must say. And again, it's called The Big Leap,
Yeah, we'll put a link to it in the
Big
description.
Leap, and
Mhm.
it's by Dr. Gay Hendricks. So those were some thoughts that I had when I saw this topic, which is, saying no. And I just thought I would pose a question to everybody, not only, hey, have you been accommodating? Are you growing out of being accommodating? And
Mhm.
also, are you struggling with when you say no? Do you like sometimes look at yourself and go, why am I saying no? I should be saying yes to this,
Mhm.
especially if there's a financial thing going on, right? I mean, I advise people all the time about jobs, right? You want to pick the position that is going to be the right role for you. And when the offer comes in and it seems like a no, but it's like the bird in the hand is better, than the bird in the bush, as the old cliche goes.
Two birds
So
with a bush.
don't I take the offer, even if it doesn't feel right?
Mhm.
Or do I take this offer because it pays me more, but I feel like it'll suck my soul away versus other opportunity that doesn't pay me as well?
Mhm.
And it's just, I think I like and dig those people better. But it's all this gamble, like I don't know, this whole thing. So anyway, I just thought I would pose this as more of a discussion point because I don't really have the answer to it per
Right,
se,
right.
because I struggle with it as well.
Well,
So those were my thoughts.
I love that. And I've used the enlightened no many times. Saying an enlightened no to someone is like, okay, I'll give you the context. It's not a fit for me. I'm thinking of somebody it is a fit for, or there's somebody else who's going to benefit from this, but I'm stretched too thin. I really can't pull this off, and I don't want to let you down. So you do need to find somebody else. So it sort of opens the door to we're all going to get along better with my no, But yeah, sometimes I'll ask myself a second question, is this mine to do? So I can do it. Um, and but is it mine to do? So is it the timing right for me? Of the people that could be doing it, am I the best person to be doing it? So sometimes to put my own needs front and center, which I'm typically not good at, is
Mm,
this mine to do? And if
mm,
it's not mine to do, I have a clear answer. Oh, this isn't for me. This is for somebody else. But a power move is to say no as a complete sentence. No, period, complete sentence, no. And that gives you a personal strength that allows you to just speak your truth and draw a line. No, can't do that. I'm a no. I'm a hard no. Hell no. Whatever it is you have to say. Uh, Dean, would you like to have a conversation about how to say no?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts about this. First thing I think it's probably helpful to people to just realize that the level of agreeableness that is part of your sort of innate personality puts you at a different place with this question.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, like Angela's talking about, Angela's describing at least a moderately high level of agreeableness, right? Of being a people pleaser, whatever.
Mhm.
I have always had a moderately high level of disagreeableness. Okay. And so, um,
You can be grouchy.
well, no, not so much that I don't ever have trouble saying no to people, but that
Are you
um,
are you
it's less inherently natural.
are you what they would call a contrarian?
No, I'm not a contrarian. A contrarian is the person who like just enjoys taking the opposite position. I just I am probably just naturally more inclined to prioritize my own sense of self over the desires of over the desires of a group, right? So I'm probably less likely to be cooperative in the same uh, in the same number of instances as a more agreeable person. Right.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not highly disagreeable, but moderately.
No,
So
I get that. Are you a 5 on the Enneagram?
I am.
Me too. So I get it. And it's just in my upbringing, I was required to be more accommodating than I really wanted to be.
Sure. Right.
Yeah,
So get it.
no no's were allowed. When the parents say do something, you jump how high, how fast, no.
And in my career too. Mhm.
So I think my point for people listening is that you may or may not have higher levels of struggle with this based on your inherent personality it's the flip side of certain kinds of strengths that you might have, right? So you might be a consensus builder. You might be a great group team member. All those kinds of things.
Mhm.
Those are all strengths that you might have, but the flip side is that you might have a hard time saying no. So I think in terms of just saying no, I think it's just really important for people to just assess who am I and how can I take my team building, consensus building kind of personality and add to it a little more strength in terms of saying no. It's funny, I was just remembering yesterday, and I wrote a tweet about this. When I was a freshman, this is where I remember kind of really learning this about myself for the first time. When I was a freshman in college, this girl I knew uh, invited me to come to her 20th birthday party or something. And her parents had bought her a bunch of booze. And um, and they had rented her a limo so she could go with her friends and drink and ride around in Indianapolis and wanted me to come. And I thought, I have never heard a more accurate description of hell than to ride around in a car with these people and not be able to leave. And so I said, no, I'm
Pull
not
over
leaving.
and let me out. I don't care where we are.
Right, right. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. And that they got angry, and I realized, oh, I survived. But being 18 or 19, I did feel a lot of pressure about it. But I think back about that as a moment where I kind of became more true to myself,
Yes.
right? And I think that's an important kind of the point that I want to make is like to say no correctly and appropriately and in a healthy way, you have to have the right understanding of yourself in relation to others.
Yeah.
And you have to see that you have to view yourself and other people as inherently free.
Mhm.
And that other people are free to make requests of you, and you are equally free to say no to them.
Mhm.
And I think it's also good to realize that most people, to at least some degree, most people, I think probably to a fairly high degree, relate in inherently manipulative ways. And
Mm.
what I mean by inherently manipulative ways is that they try to get their needs met without asking you for anything.
Mm.
So they cajole, they try to convince you, they pressure you, etc. Um, rather than acting as free, dignified human beings, presenting a request and accepting your yes or no.
Mhm.
And that as you mature and grow as a person, you want to become less and less manipulative and more transparent about what it is you're trying to achieve in a relationship, what need is it you're trying to get met, etc.
Mhm.
And so you want your relationships to move more and more toward a kind of free interchange of request and response. And the trouble for people comes when they want to be a person who's free and gives honest requests, but they're interacting with someone who has a kind of manipulative style of trying to get their needs met.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it's really important. And that's the time, that's kind of like in the example I gave, that is the place where it's most important for you to be a transparent um, answer giver, right? Because the manipulative person is the person who most needs you to be straightforward. Um, and so I think just like having these general principles of how people relate and what is a good and healthy way of relating puts saying no in the right context.
Mhm.
I'd also want people to know to think about the fact that you are always saying no. In every situation, you are always saying no. So had I agreed to go ride around in this limo, right? I would have been saying no to myself, to my own sense of self, to my own values, to my own sense of safety.
Mhm.
And so you're always in a position where you must say no to something.
Mhm.
And you often are in a position where you have to say no to someone else's need or to your own.
Mhm.
And I think most people struggle with saying no when they're in a position where they feel like saying no to their own needs is temporarily easier, or saying no to their own values and self in some way is temporarily easier than saying no to the other person. And that over time, though, that process erodes your own sense of self and well being. And so at the end, you do that so much that you say yes so much to things that don't align with who you are, who you want to be, where you think yourself, where you think you're going. What happens is that then eventually you have no or have very little self to actually give to anyone as a blessing.
Mhm.
Okay. And so like the the purpose for saying no to other people's requests sometimes is so that in the long term you can say yes to being a blessing in as many relationships as possible. But if you constantly erode your own sense of agency and power and values and all that, you don't have that to give. I think too that a lot of times people get into this situation where they get slowly eroded by saying yeses they don't mean, because they have not done the work to reflect on their own values and purpose, and they don't really know where they're going in life or who they're wanting to be or what kind of person they really are. And they don't know what aligns with who they are and what does not. And so they end up living almost outside themselves, trying to just keep everybody happy in the temporary moment, right? So it becomes this high pressure thing where you're putting on a three-ring circus instead of actually building a strong, rooted, grounded self, which can serve as a vessel of blessing, right? And so I think that's an important principle as well. And I think Brian was commenting on this. I think it's so important to be able to and know that you have a right to prioritize relationships. So I've known people who like literally feel the same level of pressure to say yes to the guy on the street as they do to their spouse, right? There's no clear delineation between level of commitment and likelihood of saying yes. So, for example, most people are very committed to the well-being of their children. So, to say no to your child is a matter of greater seriousness than to say no to a random, intrusive stranger. So, the random intrusive stranger is the telemarketer who calls me all the time, like literally every day, to want to talk to me about my timeshare, which I don't own. And so that guy gets no response except a hang up,
Mhm.
right? Now, if my child needs something and my inclination to say yes and the seriousness of that request much higher. And so I think people need to reflect on their own values, what aligns with them, who they want to be, what their purpose is, what their goals are, what they're trying to achieve, and combine that with the level of commitment to the relationship. And once you do all of that, like knowing when to say yes, when to say maybe, and when to say no,
Mhm.
um, is it becomes much easier. And I'll finish with this. It reminds me of a poem by one of my, well, by my favorite poet, William Stafford, whom
No
I've mentioned
kidding.
before, who has a wonderful poem about this very thing and about the importance of communication and connection. It's called A Ritual to Read to Each Other. And he ends by saying, um, the signals we send, yes, no, or maybe, must be clear, lest a broken line lull the dreamer back to sleep. Um, and then there's another line I can't quite remember. And he said, but the reason for that, he says, is the darkness around us is deep. And I think that's very helpful too, is that you, as a growing and maturing person, are in a process of making your signals clear because you recognize the darkness. You recognize how confused and lost without that kind of clarity people can be. And so the stronger your signal, the greater your blessing, basically.
Wow,
All
well,
right, that's enough for me.
thank you very much. And I compliment you for not getting into the limo. I think that's a wonderful story. So,
I am still glad I didn't do it.
Jonathan, hey, so good to see you here. And you've heard a lot of things about how to say no. I know
I
sometimes as you coach men, they're trying to get a yes as they ask somebody out for a date, and they maybe don't appreciate the collection of no's. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about ways to say no.
I actually, in my experience, I believe that we are actually we are born naturals when it comes to say no. When we were like babies, we were like, nah, I don't want. And it's the most natural thing. And then we become trained by society and we lose touch with that side of ourselves. At least in my experience, that's what happened to me. So it was all about reclaiming my no.
Mhm.
So it's just about reclaiming. Now, how do you reclaim your own power to say no?
Mhm.
There's different ways to achieve that. But reclaiming your no, it's important. Also, I've noticed that a lot of humans, they do not have no in their vocabulary.
Mhm.
So if you do not have no in your vocabulary, you have to, first things first, introduce no to your vocabulary. Um,
Add it back in.
uh, yeah, I mean, there were consequences when we used to say no. Like generally, we used to say no. There is a lot of consequences that most of them we are not actually aware of that they are there. They're like mini traumas, you know. So because they are there, it's no surprise how come it's so hard to say no, because there's so many layers of like blocks that prevents you from using that word, which I recommend you use because it makes your life better in many ways. It gets you closer to your inner, like in touch with yourself. Uh, like if I am at the gym, so many times these guys come, hey, can I work out with you? No. If I say yes to every single person that wants to work out with me, what the fuck am I going to like? I want to just be in my space. If I start saying yes, it will be a mess. So no. Now there are different ways to say no also, so that you don't make somebody else feel like crap, you know.
Mhm.
You can say the same thing. Hey, no, you don't have to say thank you. You just have to say no. In a way that communicates nice try. You can
No hard feelings.
ask
Yeah.
the next, yeah.
Mhm.
Don't give up. Somebody else may say yes.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's what I do personally. I use no depending on the situation. If it's someone that deserves a very harsh no, I have no problem on doing that, of course. But if it's someone like a kid or something, you know, no. Hey, uncle, pass me that. No, you're capable of doing it yourself. I trust in your capacities. Because everybody tests your limits also. Let's keep that in mind. I've learned that in my experience. So reclaiming your no, it makes your life better in any possible way. And that's what we are here for. I have my ways of teaching you how to say no based on my techniques, and you guys have your own techniques, and that's what we are here for, helping people reclaim their no's.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, that's so wonderful. Well, as we do last round robin with final thoughts on how to get a hold of you, I'm so grateful that Dean brought up that you're not responsible for how someone responds to your no, because that's part of the social pressure of why you're not saying no, even if you're overextended, even if you don't really want to do it, the social pressure of, but they'll be disappointed, but it might harm the friendship, but then they won't ask me next time, if I don't say yes every time. And to just say, well, your response is not my business. My business is to try to be true to me, especially if you're learning to say no. People say, what? You don't want to go out for beers after work? But we always do this on Friday. Yeah, not today. We're not doing it today. People can be offended or disappointed or feel like you're making some judgment of them because you've said no. And you just need to navigate. This is new for me saying no, but I really need to go do this other thing. Maybe next time. And so, yeah, don't be responsible for how other people respond to you managing your own boundary. Just understand there may be some discomfort, but you're not responsible for the other person's discomfort. You're just not. Brian, do you have a final thought or two? And how do people get a hold of you?
Sure, yeah. I wrote down a few others. I think a lot of good points have been made here. So I'll just add a few more things into it. Like, you can also say sort of a yes/no. That's a good skill. Like, you can leave it open-ended. So if someone asks you for something, you can say, if my schedule opens up, I'll see if maybe I can help. But then you're still free to say yes or no, depending on how you feel later, or you know what I mean? So it's good to be aware of that. You're not directly saying no, which might cause offense to the person, but you still have the option to say no later. I also think no one really does this, but I think people could do this. If someone asks you for something, you can just take a moment to just be quiet and just see how you feel. Just check in with yourself. And if they're like kind of staring at you, waiting for a response, just be like, hold up. Just see how you feel.
Hold for processing.
I like it.
When your feelings have kind of sorted it out, take a few extra moments and be like, yeah, I don't think I can do that one. Or say yes if you feel like a yes, Very often it's good to say yes too. It's just different situations. So I also think like if your parents raised you to basically where you had to say yes to everything they demanded from you, and you would get punished if you said no, I mean, you're going to have a lot of trouble saying no as you get older. You can improve anything, but it's just going to take more work because you always got punished for saying no when you grew up. Like if your mother or father asked you to do something, you had to do it or you were immediately punished. Like if you were raised like that, it's going to be pretty hard to say no. It's just going to take a lot of inner work to try to get, past that. And yeah, Dean, I think you were basically saying something very similar to this. And some of the rest you mentioned also kind of like a no is a yes and a yes is a no, just in different ways. So if you say no to one thing, you're saying yes to something else. So like if you say no to hang out with this person, you're saying yes to whatever you're going to do with your time instead. A no is always a yes and a yes is always a no. So just look at which one is better for you. And by the way, I'm all for helping other people and being accommodating when it's warranted. But you should do that in relationships where they're also doing that for you. So you really got to make sure, like, if they have no interest in doing that for you, you definitely have no obligation to do it for them. So it's kind of just about making sure the relationship is right. If you're in an amazing relationship with someone, it's great to do thousands of things for them. I'm totally down for that.
Mhm.
That's just a different discussion. You know what I mean? This is about when you need to set boundaries for people who maybe are kind of using you as a doormat or kind of abusing the situation or trying to get too much out of you. We're talking about those things. Yeah, it's funny. I saw an Instagram video with a guy from Estonia, and I forget the word, but he says in Estonian they have a perfect word for this. And it's like when someone asks you to do something and you could do it, but you're like, I don't really feel like it. They have a specific word for that. And so he's like, there's no direct translation in English. He's like, the closest thing in English is like, like, I mean, I could. I don't really want to, so I'm not going to. You know, they have a specific phrase that means that. I don't remember what the word is, but so maybe in Estonia they're better at saying no. I mean, they have a whole word for this exact thing. That's part of their culture. So yeah, anyways, you can
How
reach
we
me
get a
at
hold of you.
alightdesigns.org or Special K Coaching on Instagram.
Woohoo! Yay, thank you so much. Wow, we have to do a little deeper dive on Estonia. They have good linguistics there. Angela, final thoughts and how do people get a hold of you?
This was a freaking cool conversation, guys. I mean, like an hour before we started this, I made the decision to join you guys. So I'm glad I did. Something has come to my mind, especially in listening to what Dean and Jonathan were saying, and I've already, of course, addressed some of the things Brian had talked about, but I was thinking about, as you guys were talking about the children aspect of this, the child aspect of this, and also how no can actually be something that deals with safety. So you joke about, Myrna, just say no to drugs, but when you're a child, you really do need to know what the boundaries are. You need to understand how you can set your own boundaries, right? You need to give yourself and find ways to have permission to do that. So when I was reading Teen Magazine and they were writing articles and publishing articles in Teen Magazine about, are you getting pressured to have sex from your boyfriend or whatever, and how to say no if that's not what you want to do. And for a teenager, that's important to understand. You don't know much about yourself. You don't have a lot of wisdom or experience, right? And I had a similar experience to what Dean described, but it wasn't about not wanting to be stuck in a limo, though that would have been cool, being a limo. It was about being 17, and in Louisiana, you could drink at 18 that was back in the day when you could still drink. In Louisiana, where I grew up, was the last state to change over to age 21 to drink legally, until the federal government threatened to take their federal money. And so they said, okay, we'll do it. But when I turned 18, it was legal to drink. And I was the youngest in my high school class, always, because my birthday is at the end of the year. And so I had a similar thing, Dean. But in my case of saying no to the young man who wanted to go and celebrate turning 18 by going out and partying and drinking going and grabbing some beer at the grocery store and going and party with the friends that were 18, I was underage. And I said no because of this moral thing. And I had this, but there was a lot of peer pressure. They thought I was an idiot. But the serious risk of getting caught was preventing me the risk of that. And then you guys also reminded me of, I sometimes mention this to you guys, but I used to be part of an organization where we taught women self-defense. And my daughter and I volunteered in this organization, and we were asked by a fifth grade school teacher to come to her class and teach the girls in the class the topic, and it did require some interaction. It wasn't just, we're going to teach you stuff and you're going to know it in your head. We actually did some physical work too. And I remember turning to my daughter at one point during that program, because we have them get into a defensive stance. And in the defensive stance, as they get into their defensive stance, we have them learning the vocalization. No, no. And we have them say it with force and loudness. And of course, when we first started, they were all going, no, no. And so we're like getting them to really lean into their no, right? And I turned to my daughter and I said, you know, probably the last time they said no with such force was when they were probably 3.
Yeah.
When you're 3 is when you learn how to say no, and you learn your power of saying no, just like with
No
John.
nap.
Like it's inherent in us to be able to say no when we're kids, and then we get it like trained out of us, right? And especially with girls, because you're supposed to be nice and you're supposed to be a nice little girl and all that. But we're teaching them no. And then by the end of that session, they were loud and proud and saying no. It was really, really awesome. And it makes me think about how I wish when I was in 5th grade, I had been able to take a class like that and learned my no. Because when I was in school, here I was confronted with a, moral dilemma. But later in college, I was naive and I didn't understand the boundaries. And I was fortunate that this guy who was very suave and very pushy in his sweet little way. I mean, I found myself in a situation where I was like, "You're in my bedroom. What are we doing in my bedroom? Get out of here." No. I had to say no, because I wasn't ready for the step he wanted to take.
Mhm,
I mean, I wasn't physically or mentally or emotionally ready
mhm.
for the step he wanted to take. And so it was, so I think it's important that we teach children about and bring that sense of confidence and have a balance to understanding when it's good to say yes, when it's good to say no. Why are we teaching you no? What is that about? It's not just because I said so.
Mhm,
Anyway,
absolutely.
you guys this what a thought-provoking conversation this has been, and
Oh.
I
Well, I
appreciate
know we can find you on the alifedesign.org website.
lifedesign.org.
Yeah, on the About page. Cool. Well, we'll share everybody's contact information along with these notes. And now I have a poem to find, and maybe a
Yes.
picture of Clifford the big red dog, and maybe a Bonnie Raitt song. I've got homework. So, Dean, your final thoughts, and then how to get a hold of you.
A couple of things. I think it's just maybe this would be a whole other topic for a whole other discussion, but I think it's helpful to touch on the question of how do you receive a no well?
Mm.
Mhm.
And Brian's example of his friend is an example of not receiving a no well. But I think it's important for people to know that when they do receive a no, that doesn't necessarily have to be the end of the conversation if you can do it respectfully. And just asking over and over is not respectful. But as a free person, you are free to pose another question, something like, are there any conditions under which you could see yourself saying yes?
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
What would you need to be able to say yes?
Mhm.
Those kinds of questions are
Mhm.
both respectful of the other person's freedom
Mhm.
and they allow for a negotiation to emerge that is more than that allows for connection in a way that just kind of hectoring or manipulation does not. And that's a skill that most people don't have.
Mhm.
I also wanted to reiterate that saying yes or no wisely and well is ultimately a result of how well you know your own self. And that one great tool for learning to know yourself might be this copy of Know Thyself, a 90-day guided journal designed to help you do
Presented by
exactly
our
that,
sponsor, Dean
which
Abbott.
is available on Amazon. People can find me at deanabbott.com, lifedesign.org, or on Twitter at deanabbott.
I'll put a link to the journal in the
Oh,
description.
great. I think it will be helpful.
Hey, Jonathan, final thoughts and how do people find you?
Final thoughts. If anybody watching is having problems with learning or using the word no on, or has any issues on saying no at work, with relatives,
Mhm.
relationships, and if you're watching this, there's more than one person here that can help you with that.
Help is available.
Choose the one that you like the best, and and yeah, it's I have no more comments on no, so no.
I'm all done with commenting. Thank you. Well, Jonathan, how do people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on alifedesign.org. Also, Jonathan R Coaching on Instagram. and jonathanrcoaching@gmail.com.
Oh, very good. Well, this was a fun topic, and we've used it in our lives, and we coach clients about it. You can join our community for free. There's a link below. And we have a team of coaches ready to help you, which you can find on alifedesign.org. So thanks for joining us. And until next time, we'll see you.